Can we start streaming, please? We're on. Okay, thank you. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the executive meeting today on the 7th of April. First item. The minutes of the meeting. Members, are you content that these are a correct record of the last meeting? Yes? Thank you very much. We have no apologies for this meeting. I don't have any urgent business to be brought forward. It may be necessary to divide the agenda on item... I haven't got it because it's on the... Item 10. Thank you. It's not on my list here in front of me. On item 10, but I hope not. Members, do you have any declarations of interest to make? No declarations of interest. No public questions, so we will move on to the executive forward plan. Members, do you have any questions on the future items on this plan? Members, do you have any questions? No. Right, so we'll move on to item 7, which is the off-street parking order amendment. Councillor Baldry.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Leader. Thank you. This is a technical paper in many senses. Due to the change in the law, we need to change our parking orders. Mrs. Widdicombe is with me, and I'm sure will answer detailed questions. But the parking order needs to be changed simply because the Act of Parliament, as indicated in the papers, has changed. And in addition, at the request of Dartmouth, we are making some changes to parking regulations within the Market Square and also to the parking restrictions alongside Quayside Leisure Centre.
Sorry, members of the executive, do you have any questions? No. And members, no questions either. Councillor Baldry, would you like to propose?
I would like to move the recommendations and just add a couple of words, if I may. This is as a change of the law relating to moving vehicles that the new law has come into place. Moving vehicles is not relevant within South Hams because it refers to regulations relating to things like parking in box junctions and also cars, private vehicles in bus lanes. But at the same time, we would like to change the regulations relating to Dartmouth. The details are in the paper, and the Quayside Leisure Centre, we want to introduce restrictions as shown on the plans attached to the paper because we have been problems with people parking on the access road to the leisure centre, which has prevented essential supplies getting into Quayside Leisure Centre. Recommendations moved, Leader.
I'll second them. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any comments to make? Councillor Bastian.
Perhaps I'll just explain why. Just explain why the changes being made at Dartmouth Market Square is that normally they have a market on Tuesday and Friday. They now have a Saturday market, so they need to clear the cars for that purpose.
I don't know if Mrs. Widdicombe wants to add anything.
Mrs. Widdicombe, anything to add?
No, I think you summarised everything well, thank you.
Well, in that case, I think we can move to the vote on this. Members of the executive, are you in favour?
That is unanimous. Thank you, Leader.
you will recall that last year we passed the housing strategy for the next group of years. And so today we have an update on the actions from last year and the year 2 action plan, both of which are published in the second set of agenda papers. That's the first part of the paper, and the second part is the homelessness strategy. And you will recall that this went out to consultation and has now come back and is ready to be adopted. And members are asked to approve that, and also the first year action plan for 22 for the next year on that as well. On the housing strategy, I can say that really pleasing progress has been made in the first year. But because of the housing crisis, we have ramped up the action somewhat for the next year. The key actions for the next year are on page 2 of the action plan and in the appendices, as I've indicated. Sorry. As for the homelessness strategy, the notable achievements of the old one have been the prevention of 1,140 homelessness preventions between 2018 and 2022, and achieving the LEAP pad money which is government help for purchasing properties for homeless people. And the number of rough sleepers in the area has been reduced from 7 to 1, which I think is a real achievement. You now have the additional agenda papers which give you the final version of the strategy for approval, along with the action plan for the current year. And as you know, the homelessness strategy is split into the 4 categories of singles and couples, families, people with additional needs, and rough sleepers, because these have been identified as the 4 separate areas where different actions need to be taken. And I think it's timely at this moment to congratulate the housing officers on the work they do, because although there is a real housing crisis in the area, they do manage to help an extraordinary number of people, and the work they do is timely and very good. And I think, if you went to other districts, you would not find that people are helped as well as they are helped in the South Hams. So I'd like to thank them all for the work they do. Members of the executive, are there any questions on this? No. You've had paper copies of the relevant documents this morning so that you can sort them out. And there are additional copies down the other end for any members attending. Members, have you got any questions down there? No? Oh, yeah, Councillor Taylor.
Yes, please. What are we doing to try to alleviate the smaller housing need? Because in my patch, I know there's 5 houses, and the 4-bedroom houses that are lived in by 1 person. Those are the ones that could free up, providing we can get enough single units to rehouse them. They would be quite happy to move, because it's family houses that 1 person's living in.
Yeah, that is generally the problem, Councillor Taylor. You need the small accommodation in your area for people to move into, and there need to be vacancies. Now, there have been a certain number, I think there have been 6 downsizers since we started this new campaign, but perhaps Mrs. Rehag can give us further details on that.
Pressing the wrong button, sorry members. Yeah, we've really ramped up the downsizing incentive. All of that information has now gone out to the housing associations for them to promote to their tenants. So hopefully, we've had quite a good response so far. I mean, even 6, 10 in the last sort of 3 or 4 months is a huge number because of that churn that we get with the vacant stock. We're going to be monitoring that quite carefully. You're correct, we do need that smaller number of the smaller size properties for people to be able to downsize into, and that's part of the work that we do on a daily basis, really, is making sure that we've got that mix right when we have a new development come forward. Does that answer your question, Councillor Taylor?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Birch.
Yes, thank you. On page 45, the item halfway down, continue to work on the establishment of a community benefit society with registered provider status. What is the latest position on getting that up and going, please?
Mr. Brooke, can you answer that one? Yeah,
It does actually say here, continue to work on the establishment. It doesn't actually make reference to the fact there's a decision to be taken.
I think the decision that was taken, Councillor Birch, was to explore taking it forward, and I think that's where we still are. And I think we've really got to decide from the number of houses we're going to build whether it's worth doing it straight away, if I understand that correctly. Mr. Brooke.
To elaborate, that's exactly right. When we set down, when we started on a certain journey, there was a thought that the scale of properties we own would require this as and that still might be the case, but what we don't want to do is set up something which is overly bureaucratic, expensive, and doesn't really serve the purpose. So we are testing that now with the current capital programme and the housing strategy to make sure that what's in the pipeline is best served through that route.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brooke. Yes, I see you've, Councillor Birch, you've taken this off page 45, which is the priorities, which are actually in these further papers that we've had in the other part of the agenda. So apologies for people sort of fishing around in the agenda on this one. Do you want to say something on this? No. There was a further question. Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, thank you, Jude. Yeah, just commenting on that, we actually took the decision in February 2020 about that, setting that up. The fact that we're still faffing around, I think, is a poor reflection on this council, and that we seem to have our priorities upside down at the moment.
Councillor Brazil, it's not faffing around, and actually we don't require this company until the council has built and owned over 200 properties, as I understand it. So I think there is plenty of latitude and leeway before we actually have to decide on what we're doing on that matter. Mr. Brooke, could you confirm that what I've just said is correct?
I think it's not quite as hard and fast as the 200 number, but basically the benefits of having the company increase very much so the more homes we are likely to build. And given that we are, very shortly to be on site building some, it's absolutely the right time to be considering whether we need it in time for when they're completed. So that's the driver. At the point where houses are constructed, and obviously the pipeline is the key decision, because if we're only going to be building 20 or 30, it probably doesn't serve our interests as well as doing other things. So that's the position.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Because if not, I will move the recommendations on page 25 for both the housing strategy, year 2 action plan, and the homelessness strategy, to adopt it and to approve the action plan for the first year of the homelessness strategy.
Secondly.
Now, any comments? Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a comment. Number 4, options available in consideration of risk. I see we've attracted some funding for 22-23, and I'm particularly pleased to see the £6,046 of funding to support the delivery of the Domestic Abuse Act. I think that's really critical because this to prevent domestic abuse prevents homelessness, and I think that as a council we do have a real sense of helping. We are in a position to help those people who may find themselves in that situation. So I look forward to seeing, I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it's better than nothing. And I'm sure that with nothing, we've always done something. So to have something, some money would be great. And I look forward to seeing how we deliver this act over the next 12 months.
Thank you for that comment. Any other comments? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Leader. I was just going to say that whenever I've had any need of contacting the homeless officers at South Hams, Izzy and her team have always worked amazingly fast to provide homes for those people that were in need. And as you said in your comments, I found the officers here very, very helpful and very cooperative, and doing the most important thing is getting those people back into homes and looking after them. So thank you.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Hawkins. And yeah, I'm pleased to see Mrs. Cobbledick's just arrived because sorry, you missed my thanks to your team for all the good work you've done. So thank you again. Right. Any further comments? Oh yes, Councillor.
Yeah, just a general comment on the paper coming before us, Leader. I understand why it's been done for convenience, but there are two separate issues here. I don't know why we're mixing them up into a single paper. I think it would have, homelessness is not the same as the housing strategy. It's a pity that in a single paper. Looking up, hold on. The question further up, can't find it. Never mind. But I draw attention in particular to the point on page, getting there. Oh, sorry. If anyone else wants to speak, here we are. On the introduction to the paper on page 56, I think it brings out very well that the term homelessness for many people is about rough sleeping, but of course it is not about that. It is about people sofa surfing and all the other things where people have not got housing. And homelessness is a much wider question than just the people we see sleeping on the streets.
Yes, Councillor Baldry, that is the whole purpose of dividing the homelessness categories, if you like, into 4 different groups of rough sleepers, single homeless, people with health issues and families, because that is the best way. They all need different tactics to help them, and that's the purpose of the strategy.
Sorry, don't misunderstand me. I'm totally in support of what is in the paper.
I didn't doubt that. Thank you. Right, if we have no further comments then. Yes, sorry. Yeah, do.
This is a silly question. Page 36 of the paper, well, on the previous page, it refers to Judy, Better Lives for All and Housing Strategy. I know who Judy is, but on the next page, who is Barry, please?
Oh, it's the lead member for West Devon.
Good. It's not clear, I think, in a public document.
I think these are some of the papers, possibly. Yes, do.
Thank you, Chairman. The papers you had in the first circulation were the draft version. Apologies for that. The final published versions make it clear that it's the lead member for West Devon. It's a joint strategy, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, it is a joint strategy, and those papers were published in error, and you got the sort of the final version in the second part of the agenda, but it is a bit confusing toggling between the two. Now, I'll explain why you've got two things in one paper, because there is a monthly now housing crisis update, and these are the two items that were coming forward as part of the housing crisis update today. I think Councillor Baldry's had a copy of those, but he may not have brought them with him. Yes, okay. Right, well, in that case, if there are no more questions, we could pass to the vote. There are two recommendations here, and I've already outlined them. So, members of the executive, are you happy to pass these? Thank you very much. The next item is item 9, Revenue and Benefits Service Review Update. Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Leader. I was going to call you Chair, but I couldn't decide whether to call you Chairman or Chairperson, so I'll call you Leader as it's an exec group. Thank you, Leader. Reading through the report, I can but fail to be impressed by how much on top of the day job this service has been over the past 2 years, whilst validating and paying out COVID grants. Paragraph 2.1 shows the detail of some of these grants. 27,200 business grants awarded, 2,022 test and trace claims, and the list goes on. 2.5 shows what the service is responsible for daily. I am so proud of the achievements of the service, and for those who have scanned the paper and not read it, here are some more of their achievements that they do as their day job. So what is the day job? Well, in 2020/21, the team processed almost 2,300 claims for housing benefit, 14,000 changes to new claims for housing benefit and council tax reduction claims. They paid out £200,000 of additional discretionary housing payments and £150,000 of emergency housing fund payments. They received 304,000 universal credit and pension changes, of which 121,000 have required a manual change. You now get the picture. Housing benefit new claims national target is 24 days. This team turns around these claims in 17. Change in circumstances to existing claims, the national target is 11 days. This team smashes that and turns these around in 4 days. In the last financial year, 2020/21, council tax collection rates held up at 97.81% in the South Hand, and business rate collection was at 91.74. I could go on, but I think, Leader, you have the picture. This team is of exceptional quality and will continue to strive and further improve the service it delivers to, amongst others, the most vulnerable in our society, who require help as quickly as possible, as more than often this help comes in the form of money. Having said that, there are some meaningful further improvements that have to be recognised through the review. The main one being, as the service is split from the wider housing, revenue and benefits service, as homes become a priority now in the corporate strategy, or Better Lives for All, it is recommended that a new head of paid service for revenue and benefits be recruited on a self-funding basis. The basis of the self-funding would be met by stretching targets on collection rates by at least 0.5% in both councils on council tax collections. In addition to this new role, they will be required to meet even further stretching targets on other things. Thank you, Chairman. Leader. I didn't do that on purpose. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwood.
Sorry. No.
Right. Yes, I think the important thing on this is that the collection of business rates has unsurprisingly slipped a little bit during the pandemic, and it's, I suppose, always difficult to tell. And I don't think it was our officers. I think that just a lot of businesses were really struggling. But this is a welcome, I think, a necessary change to the structure of management within the council, and will bring in rewards, not only for ourselves, but for the other people for whom we collect, because the County Council and the Blue Light Services all have a share in this. And the business rates are shared between us and the county council. So it's a welcome change. Now, members of the executive, do you have any questions for Councillor Hopwood? No? Yes, Councillor Baldry.
I appreciate it is only the 7th of April and early days yet, but do we have any information, because times are hard, about what people setting up direct debits and things like that compared with last year? I'm expecting things to be much worse this year because of the state of the economy and people's pay packets, but only into the 7th day of April. But is there any indication people are not setting up the same level of direct debits for their council tax payment?
I think Mr Molyneux's got some information on that. If not, Mrs Buckle will come in second.
Thank you, Leader. There's no change at the moment. The important thing at the moment that we're focusing on is the £150 energy rebate in the council tax bills, and the first payments will be going out to those residents that pay by 1st of April. Direct debit will be going into their bank accounts next week. So that will be refunded to those A to D residents. We've set up the process for the people who don't pay by direct debit to claim that and tell us which bank account they wanted to pay it into. And we're also looking now at the discretionary scheme to make sure that we can offer additional the additional funding to those residents outside of the bands A to D. But there's no indication that the rates are low.
Mr Molyneux said it at the end, it is of course only bands A to D.
There is a discretionary fund, but the policy for that needs to be set up, and will be coming back to us shortly, as soon as it is sorted out. But I understand, I think there are negotiations across Scotland on this, so that we have something similar, aren't there, Mrs Buckle? Do you want to say a word on that, on the policy being set up for the discretionary payments?
That's something the project team are currently working on, Leader. But yes, we have been having discussions with the other Devon authorities on that, and also somebody who's a national specialist in this area.
Thank you, Mrs Buckle. I think it's one of these things, again, where the government announces something and then sort of takes ages to decide actually how it's going to be done. So I think we are moving as fast as we can on this, and as we have done with all the payment of all the other grants and benefits that we've been giving out. So thank you for the team for knuckling down to this, because it's yet another thing that government is asking us to do, and I hope that they will reimburse us for the extra effort as well on it. Right, Councillor Hawkins.
I'll just comment how efficient Southampton Council was compared to the authority where we have a business neighbouring here. Through the COVID benefits last year and support last year, this council was very, very efficient and got the money out very, very quickly. Whereas where I have my business, it took a considerable amount of time.
And I think we have decided that it would be beneficial to set up a member information session on the types of benefits and help that the benefits team can give to people, because I think it would be useful for members to be really aware of what all those are, so that if they have any residents coming to them, they can actually advise them. But the general advice is, if people are in trouble, ask them to get in touch with the council, because there's nearly always something the council can do to help, even if it's only the discretionary funds we hold for immediate payments that people need to sort of keep their electricity on and things like that. And I think, as Councillor Baldry said, those are going to become more and more frequent with the increases in costs. Right, so if there are no further questions, Councillor Hopwood, would you like to propose the recommendations, please? Thank you very much. Now, I'll open it up to comments and debate, if any. No, thank you. Well, I think that indicates the paper's really clear. So let's pass to the vote. Members of the executive, are you in favour?
That's unanimous to those recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. So The next item is the Climate Change and Biodiversity Action Plan. It's on the other set of papers, the late set of papers. And Councillor Holway, over to you. Could you put your microphone on, Councillor Holway? And I should just say that we need to be careful on figures and things in this paper, and we may have to go into confidential session if anybody wants to discuss things in detail. Sorry, Councillor Holway, carry on.
I thank you, Leader. I'm just finding the right page.
Are you? Yeah, I know.
Okay.
It's page 70. It's page 73.
Right.
But actually,
okay.
page 75 of the papers.
No, not that one.
It's 73 on the agenda, but it's modern.gov's page 75.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Dearie. Okay.
Take your time to get there, because it is.
Right. Yeah. I think we're doing quite well. We think that with regard to biodiversity, we're going to end up improving by something over 30% rather than against a target of 10%. So the indications are there pretty good. We've started to install electric vehicle charging points. There's some in Dartmouth where we're waiting for Western Power. The wait to have them collected is something like 13 weeks, which is a pity, but I think that is likely to happen in rural areas. We've allocated 50,000 of grants for schemes that will involve local groups and the public and increase their involvement in education with regard to climate change. We understand that we have one of the best action plans for district councils by an external body, the Climate Emergency UK. We are not going to take part in crowdfunding because Devon County Council have pulled out, and the cost would be something like 20,000 a year if we tried to run it ourselves. And the changes that we're proposing ahead of the review of the joint local plan, I think are good. And indeed, I'm really pleased that they are supported by Sustainable South Hams. They understand what we're doing, and that we're, if you like, we're working as a whole council. It's not just 2 or 3 people working on climate change. It's something that affects everything we do, and I think that's really good. At the same time, I think it's fair to say that we're not complacent. We know that we've got an awful lot of work to do, and we've just got to keep sort of striving really to hit the eventual targets and to save this planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holway. I think I'll just follow that up by saying that I really think that officers are tackling this as hard as they can, and I think the figures and the graphs show that, and in particular the proposed reforms of Dev 32 are groundbreaking. We are really pushing the barriers on that. I think we're pushing them further probably than any other council or joint plan in the country, and it will be very interesting to see how it actually works out, because I think there's certainly support in the 3 local authority areas for it. So on that basis, I don't doubt that we shall be able to get the reforms actioned, but it'll be interesting to see how developers and the inspectorate view it. But I think the great thing is that we're prepared to have a go on it. Now, members of the executive, any questions?
Thank you, Leader. Can I ask Councillor Holway, obviously it's good news that we're putting solar panels on our leisure centres. I'm absolutely delighted that we're actually getting there, because that is so important. We've got large roofs on those leisure centres, but also we own other properties in this district, industrial estates, and this large building itself. Are we planning to progress with that in the months ahead?
I think that's something that's still being looked at. Mr. Brooke might be able to help us on that one.
Thank you. We take a prioritised approach to this. So you're absolutely right. The leisure centres are very much the low-hanging fruit. They create the most amount of carbon, and we can offset, or we can stop producing that carbon by having a renewable energy source directly. We have solar on this building. That was done many years ago, and at the time it was done, the compromise there was the listed building and the impact that had versus the available roof space with the right orientation. So although we are happy to revisit that, I think that will be marginal gains. We do always install solar panels on new units when we build them, when they're orientated correctly. We have put them on, there are essentially only a few buildings within our portfolio that don't have them. One or two of them are in Totnes, and the one that we have put solar on, and this is in the detail, but we're having real issues with seagulls and what they do. And it makes such a difference to the output of the solar panels, and therefore it starts to raise questions as to how economically viable and how much, to be honest, if it's worth it. So, today's decision, if it's taken, is absolutely where we need to be focusing our efforts. But I do assure you that we do review it, and we will continue to do so, certainly with new buildings, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Hawkins, come back.
I think it's really important we do progress with this, because United Nations were saying this week we're practically there. We've got to do it now, and we're never going to do it. You're younger than I am, so and you've got children, so we've got to get on with this to save the planet and to look after our environment. And this is a large building, and we've got a large roof up there. So if we can progress with that, please do so with your urgency.
Yeah, until Heritage England relent a little bit, I think that what Mr. Brooke has said is absolutely true. It's going to be difficult, particularly to stick them on the front elevation of this building. Councillor Baldry.
From time to time, we get suggestions about solar panels on car parks. I don't know where he is. He keeps moving. Can you just tell us a bit more about why the decision has been taken, if it has been taken, not to put a roof on some of our car parks and then put solar panels onto them?
Mr. Brooke.
Thank you, Chairman. There's no decision being taken, and absolutely that's another area of activity. So we are actively considering that, and I really hope that in relatively short order, I'm looking at my colleague Mr. Powell, we're both on this, if that's not a very technical phrase. We want to really understand if this is viable, whether it will work. I hope it will. It will be significantly, it will be a big investment, and it needs to operate safely, and it has to work from a planning perspective. But we do believe it is worth our efforts to explore it, and we are doing that in some detail. It's quite complicated because although we know what it looks like, that's easy. But in terms of getting the right power supply in, and whether we line it up with EV, whether we line it up with battery, whether there's a off-taker immediately adjacent, which is what makes the biggest difference in terms of the economic case, not the biggest difference in terms of the energy you generate. All of those factors are in play, and they're all different on every single site. So although it's simple at one level, it's quite complicated at another. We're working on it now, and I hope we will be bringing you reports and updates on that next year.
I think Councillor Bastone wanted to come in first.
Yeah, my comment would be I'd rather see affordable housing built over the top of our car parks. Ground floor, obviously, for car parking. A single bedroom, double bedroom apartments for people who need them in our district, and there are plenty of those people. And then perhaps put the solar panels on the roof of whatever you build. That would be my preference. Oh, thank you.
Okay, can we just stick to the agenda papers, and not conjecture about what might happen. Councillor Hawkins.
I'm not certain whether I'm allowed to say this then. Hopefully this council will lobby central government, because I totally understand how historic buildings, conservation areas, etc. are very, very important to all of us. But when you can't put double glazing, which is probably better than the wooden framed windows that are in some properties, etc., it does make a farce of what we're actually doing. So hopefully we'll lobby the government for that.
We can certainly try. I think there are instances where, yeah, government needs to be lobbied quite a lot on things like that. If we've got no further questions, Councillor Holway, would you like to propose the recommendations in this paper, please?
Yes, thank you. Yes,
could you put your microphone on, please?
Right, the recommendation is that the executive notes the progress on plans aligned to the aim of the council being net zero by 2030 and increasing biodiversity on its own land by 10% by 2025. And 2, recommend the council to delegate authority to the Section 151 officer in consultation with the leader of the council and the executive member for finance to approve and agree the lending terms to Fusion Leisure for a loan of up to £500,000 to facilitate solar panel installation across all 4 South Hams District Council leisure centres over the remaining term of the leisure contract in accordance with Treasury Management advice. I so move. Have I? Oh, oops, sorry about that. And 3, recommend the council to delegate authority to the Section 151 officer in consultation with the leader of the council and the executive member for finance to update the council's capital strategy, investment strategy and treasury management strategy for 2022-23 for a £500,000 loan provision to Fusion Leisure for the solar installation in accordance with Treasury Management advice. I so move.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Could you put your microphone on to second it?
Sorry, I'll second that.
Right. Thank you very much. Right. Members of the executive, does anybody want to comment on this paper? No. Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I welcome this, and I think it's a really, really good way forward with the solar panels on our leisure centres, and I hope that this is just the start of a lot more. You know, I think that if you look at the returns that we're going to get on it, and have the whole thing paid off over a relatively short time compared to other loans that we make, I mean, I think this is a win-win situation. We're reducing our carbon output, and actually the council's going to get a return on that investment. So I'm hoping that this is just the start of many ventures like this that the council does, because I think it's what we've been calling for. You know, that actually you're investing to make money, and I think this is a much more fruitful way forward. And just finally to say, I would like to thank Tom and Adam for the grant that Sustainable South Hams got. You know, I think they're a fantastic organisation, and that I hope it's the start of a very fruitful and strategic partnership that we have with that group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brazil. A couple of comments on that. First of all, the amount of money the council is going to make out of this is only a small percentage on passing on the loan to Fusion, which they're paying back. They will be the chief beneficiaries of this because it's going to save them having to pay for a lot of electricity, but that's admirable in itself. I do think that as part of our job as a council, we could encourage farmers in particular to put solar panels on their barn roofs, because if you travel around the continent, you will see that barn roofs are used a lot for solar panels and generate quite a lot of electricity. And there was another point I was going to make that's gone out of my mind, so I won't make it. Does anybody else want to make any comments on this?
Thank you. Yes, I welcome this, the recommendations, and in particular item 2, and I'm pleased to see that Totnes is classified as an SHDC leisure centre, which is most welcomed. One or two members may understand the reason why I've mentioned that. The fact is, there is a recommendation from ONS in the subsequent item on this agenda relating to the Totnes Leisure Centre. There are issues there as far as taking forward not only development proposals but also solar panel installation. So this recommendation certainly goes some way towards moving the installation of solar panels at Totnes. It's certainly a way forward, and I certainly welcome it, and thank you for the report.
Yes, well, Councillor Birch, I think the result of this report is that when Totnes is ready, the money will be there to put the solar panels on the roof. But it's just a question of everybody being in agreement and getting there first. Yeah, Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, this is an excellent report, and I think it's a good way forward. My question is, we talked about our fleet and the way they were going to be taken into as much as possible electricity. Have we got an update on how we're getting on with that?
I think there is an update in the report. Councillor Holway, do you want to say what's going on there?
We're in the process of recruiting someone internally as on a sort of secondment. Now, I have to say, I'm not sure whether we've actually got him in post yet or nearly. Mr. Powell?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and we are literally in the process of recruiting someone in a project officer to support Adam and the team. But members will hopefully be pleased to hear that we've already done a lot of work towards what we need to do in terms of converting the fleet. So we know what type of vehicles we need, we know the distances they're travelling, we've got the money set aside for the infrastructure at the depot. So it's a question of that person just pulling all those strands together and give us a forward plan and a date for converting all the vehicles. It will be over time, in line with the R&M budget for the replacement of the fleet, but we're moving forward positively on that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I might just say, if I haven't said the words, I'd just like to say thank you to Adam and yourself for the work you are putting in and the work that you're pulling in from all the other departments in the council. So thank you, and thanks everybody.
Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, sorry, very quick, and thanks for letting me come back. Just on that particular issue, don't be shy about asking Sustainable South Hams for advice on that. They have a lot of experts within that group who would only be too happy to come forward with, ideas and a possible way forward. And the other thing I was going to say was, Judy, you mentioned about farm buildings, and I agree. I totally agree. I think that's absolutely right. I wonder if this council might look at a mechanism whereby farmers can borrow, a bit like the leisure centres, can borrow monies from this council in order to put solar panels on their roofs. Because I think that's what happens. Is the reason why they don't is because the capital outlay at the beginning, and if we can provide that kind of funding, act as a sort of green bank in a way, then I think that's something that we could progress.
I will ask Mrs. Buckle if that would be possible via the Public Works Loan Board, but I doubt it because the farmers aren't part of the council. Mrs. Buckle, can you advise on that, please?
Yes, I don't think it's something that we could get PWLB funding for, but whether it's something we could set up as a sort of loan scheme in a similar sort of manner, that's certainly something that we could investigate the feasibility of.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. Councillor Musto.
Yeah, I'd like to support Mr. Positive today. Jonathan and I were trustees of the outdoor pool at Dartmouth, and we've looked into the possibility of putting something on the changing room roof there, and but it is the capital cost, the capital outlay to do it. You're quite right, and I think it would be nice if the council could look in to finding a solution to that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Brazil. That's something we can definitely look into, and we'll come back with the results of the investigations. But I do think that encouraging farmers would be a good idea and a good way of them mitigating their cows and all the rest of it. You know, I'll say no more. Right. I think we're getting to. Councillor Baldry said, "Don't forget the sheep," but I don't think they belch as much as cows. Right. Because they don't have two stomachs for a start. Right. So I think we're ready to approve take a vote on the recommendations. So members of the executive, are you in favour of the recommendations?
That's unanimous. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is the Q4 Integrated Performance Management Report. Once again, I'd like to thank Mr. Hawke for the excellent way in which this report is set out. And the recommendations are on page 87, but I'll take any questions on this first, if there are any. Members of the executive, are there any questions?
No.
Other members, any questions on this? If not, I'll move the recommendations. Now, one is to recognise the progress in achieving our plans as adopted in the Better Lives for All strategy. Two is to endorse the key performance indicators as set out at Appendix B. And three is to commence work with lead officers on refining the 23-24 delivery plans in order to be considered by the Council in the autumn. So executive members, that will involve you in discussions with your relevant officers to make sure that everything is on track for the next year.
Seconded.
Yeah, I'll propose them. You're seconding them. Thank you. Did you want to say something?
No, I didn't.
You didn't? Oh, sorry. I thought you did. Right. So has anybody got any comments? I think executive members, I'd like you to comment on your portfolio, just very briefly, if you think there's something you need to comment on. Councillor Holway, do you have any comments on yours? You've just had climate change, so you may not.
Nothing to add really, Leader. I don't know if our officers want to fill in on any of the information. I think it sums everything up very well.
Councillor Hawkins, you've got one action that's slightly off track. I don't know whether you want to comment on that. Microphone.
At this stage, I don't wish to comment on it. We're going to do all we possibly can to bring that back on track. A comment I'd like to say, if I'm allowed to say that, is, you know, this council has got some really good officers. We're very, very lucky with all the officers that work very, very tirelessly for all our residents. So I'd just like to say that publicly. And, no, everything's going according to plan and we'll be there as soon as we possibly can. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. So housing is the next one, and we've got one that's slightly off track, and that is the purchase of the 4 flats for homelessness, the homelessness support scheme, which is called the Leap Pad scheme. We've got one purchase going through, and the real problem in the district, as we all know, is actually finding properties, A, that are affordable, and B, that are available to purchase. So we have got an extension on the money, and we shall go on looking for those. I think the really pleasing thing is that we've seen 6 families take up our downsizing scheme since we've been doing more publicity on it, and we hope that that will continue, because that's freed up 6 family houses that we wouldn't otherwise have had, so that's really encouraging. And we've heard what Councillor Taylor's got to say on that. I know there are a lot of people living in these larger properties, and if you have people in your ward that you know, you can explain the scheme to them and ask them to register with the council. So next, Councillor Bastow, yours.
Yeah, we've got one area that's not, well, we're nearly there with it, to be honest. And it's the development of a budget and marketing strategy for the area. We've started engagement with the towns and we're progressing quite, Right, we've got one area which is not up to scratch, and that is the development of a budget and marketing strategy for the area. We have been working on it. We're close to getting it put together. We've been engaging with the towns, and we're close to putting that final marketing strategy together. It'll be in the next month or so. It is important that we spend time developing it with our partners, which are the towns, and those others that wish to be involved in that process. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Bastone. So the next one is mine, and there's one item that's slightly off track, and that is the appointment of a conservation area specialist to carry forward the character appraisals and management plans of the conservation areas. Now, I've got an update on this. I think that plans are now definitely in place to try and appoint an officer, and there's also been a method worked out of how the present conservation area appraisals should be updated, because legally they have to be every so often, and the management plans, and how we can bring forward some new ones. And what I've suggested is that we should run a parallel track of bringing some of the more important ones up to date first, and also doing some new work, particularly on villages in the AONB with conservation areas, so that they have actually got something to fall back on. And I think it's also been suggested that it should be, in the first instance, for villages in the AONB which have neighbourhood plans, because they've shown the initiative there, and also because there are likely to be groups that can help with the field work, if required, for those conservation area appraisals to be brought forward. So that's my update on that particular action. If anybody wants to know any more about that, please get in touch with me, and I'll try and give you further details on your area. Right, so the next one is Councillor Baldry.
Mainly Councillor Hopwood, actually, Leader.
Oh, Councillor Hopwood and Councillor Baldry.
Yeah, but I should go first. As indicated in the report, my responsibility is for commissioned services. All is not well with FCC and the service to the public. The report says quite rightly that the garden waste service was reintroduced on the 28th of March last week. It went very well to start with. There have been some fairly big hiccups this week with the garden waste collection. We are working with FCC to improve that. But overall, of course, on commissioned services, FCC have yet to fully implement the contracted service in relation to the Devon Line service, and that is a struggle for future quarters.
Thank you, Councillor Baldry. Councillor Hopwood.
Internal services, and still the same, slightly off track for as last quarter, but we are hoping that the final testing of the planning environmental case management system is implemented in this quarter, and also with regards to making the best use of our resources. I mean, the thing that I think of that is really exciting is the new website that will be brought online next year. It will be much more user friendly and much more it'll be modern, and I think, you know, we have to accept that we have to change and we have to become a modern, forward-thinking council, and I truly believe that we're on track to do that. However, I would just caveat that with, while saying, although we are going towards our residents all being able to use online services, those who cannot use online service will not be left behind. And that's really important, that there are some people who just cannot or will not use online services, but they won't be left behind. There will still be provision for them, but obviously cost-wise, it's more cost-effective for this council if people do use online services, and that's what we're striving to go towards. Thank you.
Perhaps I should make it clear to any members of the public who are watching that we're only actually discussing the actions that aren't on track, but for every one that isn't on track, there are approximately 6 or 7 that are on track or achieved. So we're only really discussing the problems, not the good ones, but I'd like to thank officers for all the work they're doing for the other actions that have either been achieved or are being kept on track, because I think this is a really good way of keeping a tab on what's going on, and also seeing the very satisfying results that are being achieved with our Better Lives for All corporate plan. So section 3 is the programme spend, which again is mostly on track, and again there's a few delays which are mainly to do with recruitment, and I think we need to look into why there is always a delay on recruitment, but because it does hold up the progress of the particular projects. But otherwise, everything seems to be on track. We've got the key service performance diagram and report, ensuring that our services meet the needs of our residents and businesses. Then the strategic risk matrix is laid out there. Nothing much has changed. We've got 2 in the red box, and again, I'm really talking about the ones to worry about rather than the ones that are all right. And those are the waste and recycling changes and the business continuity plans. But I know that officers are working hard on business continuity. It is a risk. There's cyber risk, and I think recently there's been a bit of a risk over COVID and the number of officers that have been off with COVID, but hopefully that'll start resolving itself as the summer comes along. And there are explanations of those in the paper too. And then we have the graph of the next scheduled updates for members. And I sort of advise members, if you could look at that and make sure that you're not going to be away when it's your date to be on, particularly at overview and scrutiny, because I'm sure we can always move things around so that we can accommodate any holidays if you've already booked a holiday. Right, so we'll go back to the recommendations in this paper. Sorry, I should ask if members down there, do you want to ask any questions? No? You're happy with it? Okay, good. Okay, so executive members, are you happy to endorse the recommendations at the head of this paper?
That's 5 in favour, thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. And
that's now unanimous, thank you, Leader.
I'm sorry. I'll start that item again. Agenda item 12 is reports of bodies. The overview and scrutiny report from the minutes from the 17th of March are on the end of our papers, and I think there are 3 recommendations to the executive in those. The first is on page 95 of the agenda papers, and it was to recommend the establishment of a working group to progress the much needed improvement improvement works at Totnes Leisure Centre. Now, I have discussed this with the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny group, and we agreed that this should not be a formal working group of the Overview and Scrutiny, but that it would be useful to set up a group of members to discuss this with Tadpole and other interested parties to try and move the discussion forward. So I think there will be further discussions on who's going to be on that group and how we set it up. But just to say that we're not opposing the recommendation, but we don't think an actual working group is the right way of doing it. So, and I think Councillor Birch is happy with that. Councillor Birch, are you happy with that arrangement?
Yes, I am happy that rather than in the recommendation, it's establishing a working group. It's effectively setting up a meeting to progress the much needed improvement works. As I mentioned earlier in this meeting, there seems to be a logjam at Totnes as far as progressing the development works and also the matter of solar panels. I think the way to try and move matters forward is we could start by getting all the concerned parties together to try and see a way forward, because it's as I mentioned to you at our meeting earlier this week, I went over to the Dartmouth Leisure Centre and was very impressed, and it was very welcoming, and there are excellent facilities there. And when you contrast that with the state of play at Totnes, you know, it's something that we as a council need to try and pull out the stops to move forward the development plans and of course the installation of the solar panels. So I welcome the executive support for the recommendation, subject to replacing a working group with setting up a meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins, do you want to comment on that?
Excuse me. Yes, just to comment. I've already spoken to Councillor Birch. We'll be setting that meeting up within the next couple of weeks with all urgency, and we'll do all we possibly can to progress with that and see a way forward to get developments at Totnes as fast as we possibly can. So I assure him we're doing all we can.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Mr. White, do we have to actually vote on these or what?
In theory, as its recommendation, if you wish to vote on the revision, proposed second, at least it will make it it will formalise the matter and it'll be in the minutes accordingly.
Right. So we will vote on this not being a working group, but that a meeting will take place, or a series of meetings as required, to try and sort out the problems encountered. Everybody in favour of that?
That's unanimous for the revised recommendation.
Thank you.
Leader.
Right, so the next one is on page 97, and it is that the executive be recommended to note that Better Lives for All was not applying to the smaller communities in the South Hams, and that it should ensure that these communities were better represented by the actions in the strategy. Right, so now I think members of the executive, you may have a few things to say on this. Councillor Baldry.
I find the recommendation quite confusing, Leader. I don't know if, presumably it was voted on by a majority, or might even have been unanimous overview and scrutiny. Can somebody from the overview and scrutiny actually, or and the chairman, amplify what this is all about? Because I find it very confusing. I am totally, as members know, feel that in terms of leisure centre and leisure facilities in the South Hams, that is not applied to the smaller communities, and it jolly well ought to. But what we're talking about with the Better Lives for All is a document approved by all members, and if they had any doubts, that was the time in which they should have expressed their doubts about it. Because from my portfolio, for example, Better Lives for All includes things like refuse collection, and we certainly do provide refuse collection in smaller communities, often with greater difficulty than we do in the towns. And there are many other services provided by this council, like planning, for example, which are in all communities, smaller, larger and middle-sized. But I just don't really understand the thinking behind the recommendation, Leader.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Birch, I think it's your turn.
Can I assist? Can I suggest that Councillor Baldry reads the paragraph just prior to the recommendation, and he will understand what led up to that recommendation. It's clearly set out in the paragraph which starts "one member highlighted," etc. I don't need to read it out, but that answers the question raised by Councillor Baldry. It's just a matter of reading the report.
No, it doesn't. I have read that. It doesn't explain which facilities provided in Better Lives for All are not provided in smaller communities.
So, I'm not going to repeat what that says there, but also what also came out in the discussion and debate as an example was the fact that Fusion and the leisure centres are homed in all their activities in the main on the 4 towns rather than reaching out to the communities. And I think in the past, Councillor Baldry, I've heard you complaining about that. So
I did say in my introductory remarks, the leisure facilities do not apply in all communities, but Better Lives for All covers a much wider range of services to the district than just leisure services.
So shall I finish?
Councillor Birch, do you want to come back?
This was a recommendation. I can't recall who proposed it at the meeting. It certainly wasn't me, but I think it was one member who felt that the rural communities were being left out. And in fact, that is reflected in the report that you've just discussed, the performance management report, where it was stated that the reducing health inequality and rural poverty is slightly off track. So I think that came up into the discussion as well, that is an area that where the rural communities are have the impression that they're missing out. So that'll give you a flavour of the issues that were raised at the meeting.
I'd just like to point out on that is a huge piece of work, and that will be focused entirely on the rural communities by its very nature. The towns will not be involved at all. I've just mentioned that the conservation area appraisals, I've recommended that some of the villages should be included, as well as the updates. So I think probably it's the wording of the recommendation that is wrong, and that had it just been on the leisure centres, we could possibly have agreed, because there was a long discussion on how on what the outreach work that the leisure centre should be carrying out actually involved. But Councillor Hopwood, you come in first, and then we'll have Councillor Hawkin.
Thank you, Chairman. I must say, Leader, I've noticed Councillor Baldry, Councillor Birch really struggling to quantify the recommendation with lots of ums and ahs, and he's usually very, very concise and precise in what he's saying, and I think in that one he was umming and ahhing all the way along. So that by its very own merit, I listened to this debate, and it was focused continually around leisure centres by one member, and it's a shame that the rest of whoever the majority were that voted for this followed that one member and didn't have their own thought process, because actually Better Lives for All is about how we deliver services to the whole of our community, as Councillor Baldry said, from waste services down to road sweeping makes a better life, because it stops your drains getting clogged up. So there are so many things that this council does. We have our locality officers that go out and they make our lives better, because they empty waste bins, or they speak and educate residents on different things. And it's just, I think it's a shame that when a council like ours is doing so well, revenues and benefits makes life better if you have to claim. We've just heard about that, but that, according to this member, doesn't matter. Or these members who voted, doesn't matter. That doesn't make it a better life for all. So I cannot accept this recommendation, whether it should have been just focusing on leisure centres, which is what it actually was all about, leisure centres. So I can't support it at all, and I wouldn't even want to change a recommendation. And actually, we're only noting it anyway, so yeah, I note it, but disagree with it. Thanks. Thank you, Julian.
Right, Councillor Hawkins.
I don't think I can really follow that. When Councillor Hopwood gets on a high horse, she certainly does put us all in our place. It was mainly based around the Fusion contract and the outreach that Fusion are contracted to do. We do have 4 excellent leisure centres in the South Hams. Those are in the area centres, which is what I've always considered to be the 4 main towns. We are looking, and I'm looking at some officers around us, we are going to look into providing, hopefully, and my executive may support us, to providing better outreach in the months ahead, which I certainly would like to try and achieve for our rural communities. We are a rural district. We have our 4 main towns. We have Modbury and we have South Brent as well. But we are a rural community and we've got to do all we can to do that. The Rural Poverty Trial, we've got a meeting this afternoon, and as the leader has said, that is a huge piece of work. It's vast. And it could take, I think, every officer in the council down that route. It's huge. But we are going to have a meeting this afternoon, and we were bringing that on schedule as fast as we possibly can.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. And Councillor Baldry, if I have a recommendation to your committee... Sorry, Councillor Birch. I do beg your pardon, Councillor Baldry. Is to look at that photograph and to remember the chorus in the Messiah that is called All We Like Sheep when your committee takes a vote.
I'm just the chair of the committee. I can't instruct my
No, but you could remind your
vote.
committee of that when things like this come forward.
While we
please.
seek to exercise democracy. Can I say thank you for noting the recommendation?
Councillor Spencer, I gather, is online. Do you want to come in, Councillor Spencer?
Thank you very much. I apologise for any background noise of dogs barking. For clarity, I was the person that talked about this, just so that we know who we're talking about. And it's disappointing that the recommendation to note is not accepted by the executive, because it was actually discussed at the ONS meeting, and a couple of examples were produced, one of which you've already acknowledged is a problem, and that is that of Fusion and their lack of providing any facilities in the more rural areas. And the other one, which is the one that's actually on your report, page 97, this is where funding was obtained from the European Regional Development Fund, which was specifically a specific condition of that funding was that parish and town councils were consulted about how that money was spent, and they weren't. And I've had that confirmed that they weren't. I've also had it confirmed, and this was in November last year, I've also had it confirmed that further consultation would take place, and it hasn't. So they were just 2 examples. So I do feel slightly aggrieved that the democratic, as Councillor Birch used the word, process hasn't been respected. And also there are a couple of examples there, and I think it warrants further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer.
Councillor Hallway.
Councillor Hallway, do you want to come in? And then I'm going...
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, Leader. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Hopwood for not mentioning a place that begins with W. I thought that was quite an achievement. as someone who lives in a village and enjoys living in a village and always have done, I'm more than happy to travel to my local town to enjoy whatever facilities there are, and then to travel back to the, if you like, the relative peace and quiet of the wonderful village that I'm lucky enough to live in. My wife goes to Fusion in Ivybridge every week and usually has 2 passengers with her. And I think most people in the villages can actually get together and arrange transport. And it is just not possible to provide all the facilities everywhere. It's the way towns have developed and villages have, and people can choose where they want to live. And it's great that they have the choice. And you can't have everything everywhere.
Thank you, Councillor Holway. Now, Mr. Hall, could I ask you specifically about the European Regional Development Fund? And then I'm going to bring Mr. Brooke in on the leisure centres.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you, Councillor Spencer, for your question regarding the EU funding. I can confirm that in line with the guidance, we did certainly consult with all of our town councils. And as a result, we've spent close to £200,000 of that EU funding. And we have, there were very strict criteria which did set out that we had to deliver these activities within towns, which is why we engaged with the town councils. That's not our decision. That was a government and an EU agreement that was put in place. So we very much had to scope out exactly where we were going to deliver within towns. In the later phases, we have, as a district, managed to spend funding which will be of value across the district, including materials for publicising of South Hams as a place and promotion of our, all areas of South Hams. So happy to pick it up offline and have a chat, and certainly I can bring forward an update to members of exactly how that funding was spent. But I can reassure members that it was spent across the district. But with a specific focus on the towns.
Thank you, but thank you for clarifying that was actually the government instruction and not anything to do with South Hams. Mr. Brooke, you had a plan or a map of access to leisure centres and how many minutes away the various villages were, didn't you?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we did have this discussion. So if you take a 10-minute travel time from each of the 4 leisure centres in South Hams, it does cover a significant, I have to share this, it's not anything that's hidden away. It covers a significant proportion of the district. And if you extend that to 20 minutes, which is deemed to be about the sort of maximum, the working assumption of how far people will travel, there'll clearly be exceptions. That covers virtually 95% of the district. I would say there are areas that are outside of that, but the majority of the population centres are within it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Baldry.
So I don't want to prolong this too long. I suspect that Mr. Brooke could not get to a leisure centre in the South Hams in 10, 15 or 20 minutes if he was obeying the speed limit. Chairman, this has gone, since my first remark, this has gone offside. The bit I'm objecting to is the bit that says that smaller areas were systematically penalised. Mr. Birch has said, Councillor Birch, sorry, has said this went through his committee. Therefore, more people than the proposer would have voted in favour of it. I would be I don't know if we're allowed, Mr. White, to amend this. I would be more than happy to vote for something that said that Better Lives for All was not applying leisure services to the smaller communities in the South Hams. That is certainly something I feel very strongly. But to say that smaller areas were systematically penalised and that Better Lives was not applying right across all smaller communities in the South Hams is just not true. Can we amend it to just put leisure services in?
We haven't taken a vote yet.
No.
But when we come to it, I will consider that, Councillor Baldry. Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't mention Woolwell just now because I actually had a very productive meeting with Fusion yesterday about their outreach work, and I believe that Councillor Spencer had one with them last week. So I I don't know how productive his was, but mine was certainly productive. And I think the problem we've had up to now with Fusion, and yes, it is going off track, but needs saying, and I brought this up with Mr. Parkinson yesterday, is the fact that actually members don't really know what outreach means and what is in the Fusion contract for delivering of outreach, and that's a problem. And it was an issue that I've always had, but now I understand it. But I think that it's important to say that Better Lives for All and leisure doesn't just focus around leisure centres. It focuses around beaches. The South Hams has the most amazing coastline. It focuses around coastal walks from those beaches. It focuses around woodland areas, countryside. It may be walking to your local village hall for a coffee morning, which is only a 200-yard walk. That's still an exercise. It doesn't just focus around leisure centres. And I think the 10 minutes to drive to a leisure centre, which they reckon the national approved time that people will drive to a leisure centre in, to make it worthwhile using. Well, actually, in the South Hams, I do think that's a bit of a false argument, Mr. Brooke. I'm sorry about that, because I couldn't, I certainly can't get to a leisure centre within the South Hams within 10 minutes. And there are lots of areas that can't. But can we just remember that we don't take exercise just through leisure centres? And actually, I don't want to be indoors taking exercise. And there are a lot of other people like that who want to take exercise outdoors. And my other question on this recommendation is, it's a recommendation for noting, but how do we're being recommended to note it, but I don't want to note it. So how do I be unrecommended to note? Thank you.
I think we've probably batted this around enough, but suffice it to say, Councillor Birch, could you be a little more discriminating perhaps when a recommendation comes forward to either amend it or, well, I can't tell you how your members should vote, but I think if they were to look at this again, they might not have been as enthusiastic about the wording as they were at the meeting when it was one of these things that came forward on the spur of the moment. So I think this is a kind of lesson in that kind of recommendation coming forward. But I'm now going to, I think we've tossed it around enough, and I am convinced that there is a lot in Better Lives for All. It may not actually say this is for the villages or the smaller communities, but there are a lot of actions in there that apply either right across the piece or which are for the rural areas. And I think that's the important thing that we've got to remember. Right. So I get the feeling that the mood is, I shall take the vote on the negative first, that we do not note this one.
Lee, can I help at all? We haven't actually got proposed, and it hasn't actually been proposed and seconded as for this week. So we are.
Sorry.
No, I mean, if there is a wish to propose and second it, it's obviously voted on.
That we reject it.
And I'll second it. So can we take a vote on that, please? Right.
That is unanimous. Thank you, Leader.
Take a long time, but do. Right. So there's a third one now on page 98 of the agenda. And this is to do with the Affordable Housing Task and Finish Group that was set up by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Now, once again, I have discussed this with the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Group, and we have agreed that the proposed 1 and 2 of this recommendation are acceptable, but that 3, that's actually what we were asking the group to do, and we were asking them to go through all the schemes to see if they could come up with some recommendations of what they thought were the good aspects of those schemes, not to ask officers to do that work. So they have agreed, to go back and reconsider number 3. So I suggest at this time we do not take a vote on these recommendations, but await their further information on number 3 so that we can consider it all together. Does that seem a satisfactory course of action? Yes?
Yeah.
Everybody agreed on that?
Yeah.
Right. So, Councillor Birch, I was going to ask you if you agree, but please come in.
Thank you. Yeah, you're quite right that we discussed this earlier this week. After our meeting, I realised that what in fact is that the report that is the recommendation that is before you is not actually complete, in that it did have a preamble that did contain some of the information that you're looking for. So it's just unfortunate that the recommendation that comes before you is not complete, in that it doesn't contain the preamble. But putting that to one side, what I propose, what we offered, and what I believe we agreed, is that we would amplify number 3 with further information, so that you have a more so you have a recommendation before you that contains some of the information that you and I discussed, which would make the recommendation complete. So what I propose is that I and the Vice Chair of ONS, who was also the Chair of the Task and Finish Group, is that we liaise with members of the Task and Finish Group and come up with the further information to make this a complete recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. I mean, it may even involve writing a short report, but what I don't want is just a list of links to websites. I do want the important points to have been pulled out, so that officers have got the information at their fingertips. Thank you. Right, so we'll defer that one then. And I believe that brings us to the end of the meeting. So thank you very much, members. It's just before 12:25, and I'm closing the meeting.